Hey guys, what's up? It has been, you know what I'm gonna say, a while since I've done a video. I can never miss top 10 albums video of the year. This is probably one of my favorite videos to make. I always like making these and hearing what other people's top albums of the year were. And I would say that this year, it surprised me a lot with bands that I found and just different types of music that I really genuinely liked that are on this list. So without further ado, I will put all of the honorable mentions up here. We got Marauder by Interpol, J. Cole's K.O.D., Time and Space by Turnstile, and Sunnyland by Mayday Parade. And then let's get straight into this top 10 here. Here is number 10, Burnt Sugar by Gouge Away. Gouge Away is more of a smaller punk band led by a female vocalist, and she definitely has one of the most grittiest voices I think right now in punk music. You could kind of consider this in a way hardcore punk, but I wouldn't really say that this album is very hardcore than just like a very raw punk album. With her voice, it literally just shreds right through these songs. And then she also can get very soft and melodic on certain parts of these tracks when necessary. My coworker actually was the one who showed me this band. Somebody at a record store told him to check out this album, and then he sent me one of the songs thinking I would like it. And that first song I heard was Ghost, and then like right away I got way more intrigued with this album. Really interesting things going on, from just the dynamic and the guitar work to the heavy bass that really sets a strong foundation for this album, and the drums just are super punchy. This album may in length be about 26 minutes long, but it truly, you don't even feel like it's 26 minutes because you're so lost in this record by how good it is. All around, definitely a great punk album. Something that I haven't heard from a lot of punk bands lately is kind of like diversity and dynamic, and I think Gouge Away does a really great job of that, especially on this record. And some of my favorites on this one are Ghost, Stray / Burnt Sugar, and Subtle Thrill. Number 9 for me is Historian by Lucy Dacus. Lucy Dacus, I wasn't familiar with her, always heard her name kind of pop around. She's done a couple tours with Julian Baker, and she was actually just on the most recent tour with Julian Baker. A lot of female vocals you don't hear in the way she kind of does it. She has a very warm but also deep voice, but she also can create a brightness to her voice when necessary. A lot of this album is very personal and intimate. I think it's a lot more personal than her last record she came out with, which felt like a little bit more of an indie rock album, and this album just feels a little bit more stripped, a little bit more like reserved and kind of reflective. She goes through a lot of different things by talking about issues in her own head, her own beliefs, and like the death of her grandma. So there's a lot of things that she puts out onto the table. I think if you're looking for a good singer-songwriter album that feels very real and personable, this is definitely the one to listen to. I was a little late to the party listening to this album because it came out in March of this year, but I didn't start listening to it until I saw her on tour with Julian and Phoebe, even though I missed the majority of her set. Go Me and Boston Traffic, great, around like November, so that was as late as I listened to it, but this album really grew on me. My favorite songs are Non-Believer, Shell, and Pillar of Truth. Number 8 on my list is Erase Me by Underoath. This album arose a lot of controversy in it because this is Underoath's first record that I'm pretty sure not on Tooth and Nail. It's on a completely different record label, Fearless, which is a lot more of a marketing type of record label, if you will, and I'm not hating on Fearless because there's bands on Fearless that I do like a lot. But that kind of struck controversy for some people, as well as quite a few of these songs having some swears in it. The first Underoath songs ever with swears. And that got a lot of people thinking like, are they a Christian band? Like, and a lot of this album kind of talks about stepping away from God in a sense. But that's not why I like this record. Why I like this record is because they are so passionate about it, and this is their most honest album to date. A lot of this writing has to do with Spencer struggling with his drug addiction and kind of trying to fight to want to stay sober and everything, and how it's hard because obviously like his addiction kind of has taken over a lot of himself, and it kind of shows that he's turning away from God because of this addiction. So a lot of this album is struggling with that. And when I saw the Erase Me tour super recently, actually like a couple weeks ago, and getting to talk to Spencer and telling him I appreciate like how honest you're being on this, and they were saying like how proud they were with this record, it made me have more of an impact on me as well. I definitely think it's one of the best hard rock albums of this year. I haven't heard a lot of hard rock music kind of sound anywhere interesting, and I think the nice thing about this album too is Chris Dudley, the keyboardist, really does shine a lot and show his talent on this record. You hear a lot of different manipulations, and it's all because of these synths and these big effects and big production, and I don't think it would have been possible without Chris and his talent to really like show off more of like his keyboard work and everything. But Aaron, this is the first record they've made in 8 years, and to kind of just step back into it I think is hard, but I think they found a groove that really worked, and I like how all of these songs connect with each other, and the album really I think does flow well from start to finish. It may not be my favorite Under Oath record ever. I really don't think it's the most groundbreaking thing they've ever done. But I still like it, and it was something that I was coming back to a lot this year. 7 for me is Ruiner by Nothing Nowhere, who is a little bit more of a recent, but he has blown up a bit, type rapper singer. A lot of hype, I think, because Pete Wentz is like good friends with him, and he's also on Pete Wentz's record label now. So he's been getting a little more hype that way, and also opening for Fall Out Boy has really, I think, opened a lot of doors for him. But the thing I like about him is he uses actually a lot of minimalism in his songs, and he doesn't need all of this, I think, grandiose production to kind of wrap around it. The soul of Joe is really in this album, and I think it's great that he wrote all the songs himself, and I'm pretty sure he produced like a good chunk of this record as well. This whole record takes you inside of his mind, and I really feel a strong relatable connection to a lot of these songs. A lot of these lyrical themes talk about struggling with change, and that's something that I've always had an issue with. He touches a lot on these songs how he misses these old friendships that he had where he felt really close. He misses like going to his hometown and going to all these places, but now like they're changed, they're different, it's not the same anymore. People change, they grow up, they grow apart. And he kind of just reflects on all that in an extremely relatable but real way. It's nice too because when you hear his singing, it can almost be kind of R&B-ish and very falsetto-y, but then he kind of gets angsty on some of these songs. And his rapping on this isn't super consistent throughout. I would say he kind of does more of the singing than rapping, but when he is rapping, he can slow it down and speed it up really well. I also think this album is a major step up from his last album, Reaper. It just felt like that album, I think he was trying to get a little bit more traction. And like I said, this album definitely feels a little bit more underproduced. And like I said, I'm not saying that in a bad way at all. I think the minimalism is really what shines on this record. Like the looping little electric guitars. And there's some drums and other like organic instrumentation in this. But I like how it's just very minimalistic and you can really hear what Joe's saying. Some of my personal favorites were Vacant, Sinker, and Reminiscer. 6 on my list is The Silver Scream by Ice Nine Kills. I think if you want a horror film inspired album that really does justice to the films it's talking about, look no further than this album. It's really quite a risk to kind of take on when you're writing songs inspired by very like well-known kind of iconic things, whether it be books, which they actually have touched on their last record, to also films, especially like big kind of blockbuster horror films. And they also did some that aren't as well known, but still pretty well known. And I gotta say, they really did an amazing job pulling this off. This is definitely one of the most intriguing metal albums I've heard this year. I didn't listen to a lot of metal this year, at least from new records, because a lot of it's kind of the same thing, but on this album, none of it feels cheesy at all. They could have kind of made it that way, but everything musically on this album really shines and adds to the songs. And I like how the lyrics kind of switch back and forth depending on which song you're talking about. The singer Spencer could be the protagonist, or he could be the victim, or the one narrating necessarily what's going on in it. And these songs really paint a good picture of the films and like what the films are about, and again, the musicality that is attached to these songs. The breakdowns really feel like they should be like a part of the soundtrack from the album, and in some cases they take some of the music that's a part of those films and they throw it into the songs, and they sound incredible. They really do. It kind of jaw dropped me when I was done listening to this record. I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. Spencer's screams, I gotta say, are very, very strong in this album, and as well as his singing voice. He has kind of this deeper, but also like melodic range to his voice that sounds really strong. And he really puts himself, if he's talking about a certain character that he is in a part of the film or the victim, he really pulls that off well with really making you believe that. Some people may think this is only like a Halloween record or something you can listen to in the fall or October, but I gotta say, like, even after this came out in October, I'm still jamming to this like non-stop because, again, like I said, the music is so strong on this record. Really strong guitar parts and drums, and like I said, the vocals just all around was great. Some of my favorites on this one, it was really hard to pick favorites, but Stabbing in the Dark, The Jig Is Up, and Thank God It's Friday. Number 5 for me is Trench by 21 Pilots. And when I was done listening to this record, all I could think was, wow, 21 Pilots really took kind of more of a risk on this album. By their last record, Blurry Face, being such a huge commercial success, you had like several songs from that record on the radio non-stop, and they gained a bunch of popularity through that. You have an album that takes a lot more of a chill, relaxed, and a little bit more of a minimalistic approach to it when necessary. Again, just because it's more chill and relaxed doesn't mean they can't throw the fire in when needed. There's some tracks on here that are a little bit more fast-paced and upbeat, kind of in a similar way as Blurry Face, most of the tracks on Blurry Face, but a lot of this album kind of, again, takes some restraint, and it's more reflective, and I think a lot of the lyrics on this really shine and are very strong. Whether you feel like this record is taking you through that whole theory of DEMA, or it's just talking about like mental health issues and kind of Tyler Joseph's life and his personality, I really think you can see either side of the story of this album. I think if you look at it in that DEMA theory way, it does make sense and kind of ties together everything, and they use things that are symbolic from their last record and such. But I think for me, I just listened to this album and heard it speak about different mental health issues. It touches, as usual, like most of the songs do, on suicide, self-harm, depression, anxiety, paranoia, but it also touches on just like loving the people that are in your life. I think he wrote a song on this album for his grandfather. I'm pretty sure he wrote a song for his wife, Tyler Joseph did. And there's so much here, but it all works so well together, and these songs really do collectively fit. I like this album too because it doesn't feel like just one genre. 21 Pilots kind of genre blended a little bit on here. You get some kind of R&B influences to the hip-hop influences to the rock influences. There's so many different elements on this that just work so well to their advantage, and this is probably one of my favorite 21 Pilots albums, I'll be honest. This more relaxed and chill approach I really do like and appreciate. A few of my favorite songs off of this album are Neon Gravestones, Morph, and Jumpsuit. Number 4 for me is Clean by Soccer Mommy. Really had no idea who Soccer Mommy was actually until the beginning of this year when they, actually I should say she, but they opened for Phoebe Bridgers. I know it's just mainly Sophie is really Soccer Mommy, but also having the full band aspect to it too, I think really helped builds that. And seeing them in a live setting and hearing some of these songs before they were even released kind of drew me into the curiosity of Soccer Mommy. And then I know they've gotten a little bit more popularity because they also toured with Paramore. I checked out this album really kind of expecting good things from it because of what I've heard live. And I think the main member of this group, Sophie, really gives this album such a relaxed feel with her voice. And some of the songs lyrically kind of hit you a little bit hard, but then she almost hides it with some sarcasm thrown in. And I really like that about her style of writing on a lot of this. It just feels very easy breezy to listen to. I listened to this album a lot during the summer, and it feels more like a blend of like a summer-fall album. I think it has tendencies that shine kind of through both seasons in a way, because some of it feels like a bright fall day, and then other times it just feels like a nice summer breeze. So that's, I think, the really cool things about this album is it really puts you in this mood. Really just makes you feel like relaxed, and the instrumentation to back it up too is also very strong. It's got like this nice indie rock feel to it, and there's a lot of like strong little moments on this album. Just the little organic instrumentation touches to this album really make it shine. There's not a whole lot of bells and whistles here. It just feels very natural, and I think with her laid back attitude too, it makes you fully get them. A few of my favorites are Scorpio Rising, Cool, and Wildflowers. Number 3 on my list is Untitled by Me Without You. This album really took me by a surprise because I only like casually listened to Me Without You and never really heard a full album by the band. But a lot of people were giving this album praise, some of my favorite musicians were, and I'm like, you know what, I'll give this album a chance. And I remember hearing it a little bit like recently after the release date, and I gotta say this album is great for 2 main reasons. I think the first one is when you listen to it upon casual listen, it really takes you by storm with how strong the instrumentation here is. It's like a nice hardcore indie rock sort of album, and it takes you through this flur of different emotions and feeling just by the way Aaron, the vocalist, is kind of just portraying himself, whether it be the spoken word or kind of these screams where you feel like he's like crying out really, and just the way he sings. And I think that really sells a lot of this album to you just by the overall, just listening to it casually. And I think the second point of this album, of why I really like it, is when you go deeper into the lyrics, there's this whole meaning and symbolism behind a lot of these songs. Because kind of when you're listening to them, you're like, okay, I kind of get some of this, but like when you really like actually like look into the lyrics, there's a lot of biblical imagery and symbolism here. Aaron even takes like things from like Spanish Wars, French Revolution, kind of like different types of historical things too, and throws it into the songs. And he uses all of this symbolism to describe what's kind of going on in his head. And I think it can be a little bit overwhelming at times to be like, wow, there's so much to kind of wrap your head around with these songs. But I think if you just kind of look at the symbolism generally and then kind of take your own interpretation for it, it's an overall really great album, and I think that's the nice thing about it. When you listen to this on casual listen, there's some epic songs and then there's some more like slow down songs, but it really feels like one whole collective piece. And I like how this album really, like I said, just takes you inside Aaron's mind and the things that perk his interests and stuff. He even talks about like some of the members of the Beatles in it, and like a Beatles song reference kind of thrown in there. So he takes a lot of different things to kind of really describe. Some of my favorites off of this album are New Wine, New Skins, 2,459 Miles, and 9:27 a.m., 7:29. And here we go, we're getting to the nitty gritty here. Number 2 on my list is High as Hope by Florence and the Machine. Florence gets very honest and vulnerable, but also very empowered on this album. You kind of see 2 sides to her that I feel like you kind of got a taste of on her previous albums, but I think it's really more reflective through this record. Her voice flows perfectly like the wind in the trees here. The overall feeling of this album breathes like spring to me. A lot of these songs feel very delicate in places, but more tough in others, but it all has a balance. I like the different use of different percussion and just different sounds and textures. There's really beautiful string sections of like violin, you hear some harp occasionally, and I think with the instrumentation tied with her voice, like I said, she really sells you on these songs, and it really breathes spring. I mean, I listened to this album a lot in the summer because this album came out in June, just like the track, June. I don't know if she did that on purpose, but she might have. But I think this album is great to listen to when the sun's shining, but like I said, it feels like more of a spring album just because of the delicacy in this album, but like I said, there's more tougher, stronger tracks here as well. Some of my favorites are 100 Years, Big God, and Sky Full of Soul. And my #1 album of the year, which may be a shocker to some people, but I've given this band a lot of like love in the past, and I've never really got to fully go off on kind of like one of their records before, but hopefully at some time maybe I can review something, like review an actual album from them instead of just talk about them, but it is Near My God by Foxing. This album is a mixed bag of tricks that works so well together. It all connects to a recurring theme on this album. The name of the record from a hymn, Near My God to Thee. This album's lyrics talk about the struggle, kind of trusting in God or trusting in whatever that religion may be. But here Connor's kind of talking about, I think, Christian beliefs and like Catholic beliefs here. The vocalist Connor grew up Catholic, and he always struggled with the practices in Catholicism and like what his father believed in everything, and kind of like what's wrong, what's right, am I gonna go to heaven, like having kind of all these questions, and he puts them on the table here on a lot of this record. He goes into this record and how he feels very selfish, hopeless, and doubtful, and then the issues also go deeper into him talking about his different relationships, whether they're love interests or just mourning over the death of his friend. Connor sells the complete mood with how emotional and real his voice gets, whether his screams feel like he's crying out loud or how smooth as butter his melodic vocals feel. This album definitely takes influences from the early 2000s emo indie scene. You kind of get a little bit of some Me Without You vibes in there, a little bit of some like early Portugal the Man in a sense. But this album does, in a way, feel like a Foxing record. I think it's definitely their most ambitious album to date because there's a lot to take in. This album can get very bombastic, but then it can also get very relaxed. And it's almost dramatic in a way, like it feels like you're watching a play and you're kind of gripping to your seat on like what's going to happen next, because there's so many sounds in this album, but it all flows together and it all connects together very well. It has its bombastic moments, but also its charismatic moments. I think this album works really well for Foxing. Like I said, they took more of a little bit of a risk kind of expanding their sound, but this album is just really strong. I think the only thing I'm craving a little bit from it, even though it's my top 1, I'm just craving a little bit. I wish it had some more trumpet in it, because you do hear trumpet on a few of their past records, and I kind of just wish it shined a little bit more here. But overall, I really can't complain much about this album. This was an album I was constantly going back to this year the moment I heard it. Some of my favorites for me are Won't Drown, Near My God, and Trapped in the Dillards. Well, that was my top albums of 2018, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I didn't go too lengthy or too short in some of these. It's kind of hard to find that balance when you're talking about each album on this countdown, but I hope you enjoyed my list. Let me know some of your albums down in the comments below, and what you really liked this year. Before this video is over too, I just want to give a quick shout out to my favorite EP of the year, which is Boy Genius's Boy Genius EP. And I mentioned this kind of with Lucy Dacus, but this is kind of the super group of Julian Baker, Phoebe Bridgers, and Lucy Dacus, all doing vocals as well as doing instrumentation on this. I think they all played, there was like guitar, mandolin, they did a lot of different instruments on this, and it's cool to see these artists behind like a full band, and there's really a huge collection of sounds on here that sound great. It's so cool to see Julian Baker just singing and harmonizing with other artists and kind of switching back and forth, especially because of how strong these 3 ladies are in the vocal department as well. They just have great talent, and a lot of these lyrics are really raw and emotional and make you feel a lot of things. So just want to give a quick shout out to that. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, As usual, stay brutal, stay tuned for more videos, and see ya guys later.